All right, looks like this is recording now. I'm just looking at sharing a couple things with you guys today with the UML diagram we're working on. I worked on the class diagram, state diagram, and sequence diagram. So I'm basing them off of my current MVC and one of them off of the application pattern controller. Sorry, application pattern controller. And let me go ahead and open those up really quick and share them with you so you can see how I did them. And let's see here. So the first thing, and I'll share my screen quickly if Internet Explorer would turn off. All right, screen share. All right, so let me get into Visio. So this is the sequence diagram for part of my code, and it's a calculator that basically just can give it two numbers. You can multiply, divide, subtract, or add, and it's going to spit out a message with your sum at the end there. So for a sequence diagram, it starts out with the user who begins the program and is prompted by a message to enter a number. The user will enter a number and it will send that number and store it, and then send back another prompt asking for an operand: add, subtract, multiply, or divide. You're going to enter in one of those, it's going to put it over here, it's going to get stored, and then you'll be prompted for a second number, which is then entered, stored, and then after these three things have been stored, it gives that information to the math handler, which then has some options here. If a adding operand was put in here, then it will use add for the math handler. If subtraction, then subtract, multiply, divide, you know how it goes. So with each one of those, if it's add, it's going to send back the add result, and that message will be displayed to the user. Same thing with subtract, multiply, and divide. So that is the sequence diagram of what happens when someone uses the calculator that I have. Then for the, let's see here, we can look at state diagram. This is actually very small, very simple, because I did it for my MVC, which is a mortgage calculator. There's not a lot to it. There's not a lot of options. You're just entering in some numbers and getting some information back on how much you'll be paying each month. So for that application, this is pretty small, but I know that part of the requirements were to create UML diagrams based off of things that you've programmed so far for full credit. So I've got this now, and if it's needed, I can grab someone else's application that's a lot more complex and do a state diagram for that. But it's all pretty much the same kind of information. So there's the start here, and the view is displayed to the user, which they can enter information. And then when the calculate button is pressed, it does a calculation and updates the view, which then different information can be pressed or can be entered. Calculate button can be pressed again. This can happen in an infinite number of times. It's just a loop. And eventually they're going to end the application by pressing X, and that will lead it to the endpoint over here. Very simple, to the point. If you had different views, then you could, of course, say, all right, well, there's this view, but if they click on the calculate button, they'll go here, but if there's another button to change the view, then it'll go over into another view which has its own buttons and can lead back to that one, or maybe you look back to here. Or, there's a lot of different possibilities, but the purpose is to give a very straightforward, easy to understand example of how the application works from start to finish, so that business users can understand it easily and say, yeah, this looks great, or maybe we should add some more functionality into this part or that part. And then for the last one, let me pull it up for you. That's the class diagram for my MVC. So there's the model portion, which has two private variables, monthly payment, monthly interest rate. And then we've got round, calculate monthly payment, and get monthly payment. For the well, actually, we'll look at the view first. Oh my goodness, I have this backwards. All right, this is how it's supposed to be, and oh my, wow, sorry. This one is, we're gonna go back a little bit here. This line is not supposed to be here. That should be part of the controller. And one of these lines right here goes to the view. All right, so now that that looks horrible, we can still understand it. The view and the model are not connected. The view and the model connect to the controller. This just looks bad. But once I get this fixed to look a little bit nicer, okay, that's more understandable. All right, so there's the model, the view, and the controller, in which the model and the view communicate with the controller, which communicates with the MVC. MVC also communicates with all three of them. All right, that's how it's supposed to be. And I need to email a different version of this to the professor. But then for the view, we have different J labels, text fields, buttons, because we created JFrame in here, and these are the different parts of it. And then we have our getters, our setter. We have a listener, an error message as well. And then in the controller, we have a version of the view, or well, of view and model, called the view and the model. And then we have controller, which takes the view and the model, these ones that we will have created, and we will add a listener. Then with this listener, and I'm not sure if this is the correct way to do it, but this is what made the most sense to me, was to have this indented here to show that this is actually, this could be taken out and put somewhere else, but it is part of controller. So we're not going to give it its own class, because we do have it as part of the controller class. But we'll have the mortgage listener and action performed. It's going to try to do these things, and it'll catch error message. Then we have the MVC, which is very simple. View, model, and controller, bring it all together, make it visible. And those explain the different classes that are part of my MVC program. Now, I've seen, usually people like to break them up as small as they can and include the least amount of information. I kind of tend to get away from that. I like to have overkill on the information, but at the same time, some people think, well, if you're writing that much, you may as well just write the program and not have UML at all. But I suppose that it's really all up for interpretation, and people can really do what they like. Now, I believe that with UML, it's important to understand the different types of UML diagrams. I will say that everyone that I've talked to that is working out there in the tech industry, working as programmers or testers or whatever the case may be, 98% of them are not even using UML diagrams. They say that they are outdated, they are useless, and that there are much better ways of conveying your thoughts. Now, of course, it's going to depend on where you're at and what you're doing, and you may very well end up at a place where they heavily use UML diagrams. So this would be important to know in that situation. The school is preparing us for all sorts of different types of situations. Some, when we leave here, we may never actually deal with, but it's important to know because one day you may need to use it. Because there's that possibility, they like to give us the chance there to, well, they like to try and teach us. So that's what I've got on UML diagrams for the week. And if you see anything in there that you notice was wrong, for example, I noticed my mistake on the MVC had the model and the view communicating in the diagram for some reason, which is ridiculous. But if you see anything else in there that you've noticed, feel free to let me know. Just make a comment down below and let me know what I can do to make it better. And any other kind of comments, maybe about how I didn't shave or how my hair is way too long to go to school at this university, those are welcome too. Let's have some fun with it, but just let's get some conversation in here. So thanks, guys.